This is Wayward Radio, your official source for news and information on the Wayward Realms. Greetings, fellow wanderers, and welcome to Wayward Radio, your ultimate gateway of untold stories, hidden lore, and of course the latest updates from OnceLost Games' epic creation, the Wayward Realms. I'm Joe, your host and fellow explorer, ready to guide you through a world of mystery, magic, and mayhem. From 3-page character backstories in tabletop role-playing games to our princess is in another castle, nothing motivates a player to push forward like a great story. Stories can be told narratively through NPC dialogue, or it can be implied through intricate craftsmanship in a weapon, armor, or even a culture's architecture. The Archipelago is going to be a new place for us to explore, liberate, or maybe even conquer. How will the story of this vast new land compel us to move forward? To not accept defeat is the answer, to fail upward, or to succeed backward. Our quest tonight will be to seek these answers, and joining us in our adventuring party is Ted Peterson, CEO of OnceLost Games and game director of the Wayward Realms.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Ted. Welcome back to the show. Great having you.
Thank you.
Also, Victor, creative producer of the Wayward Realms.
Glad to be back. I do want to say that Ted and I are here so Blake wouldn't beat us in the amount of episodes.
I see. There's a measurement going on here, a contest.
Oh, we're keeping track.
And not Mike Blake has returned to the podcast. Hello, designer and lead writer of the Wayward Realms. Welcome back, Blake.
Thank you. Glad to be back. I only showed up just to see if I could at least keep the record tied.
You're racking them up. It's so I want to ask you guys real quick, and whoever wants to jump on this, feel free. We've got a really big show for you folks. So if we go a little long, just forgive us, but I want to make sure that we get down to the nitty gritty on this. So first question, tossing it up, whoever wants to snatch it may. Can you please give us a general overview as to what's going on narratively in the Archipelago, along with any historical context?
All right. Well, let me toss a question back at you. And how deep do you want to go?
I like a deep dive. So,
I guess to keep it somewhat simple, focusing on just the Archipelago and not the other little ties that they have with the rest of the world. Obviously, we have the two kingdoms of She and Splendour. She's predominantly orc. Splendour's predominantly human, but has a really good mix of all the races. They have a history of warring with each other. The Archipelago used to belong to the orcs, about 1,000 years ago. And then humans were the first to come in and start trying to settle the land and conquer it. And orcs slowly got pushed up north into She. So there's always been that conflict between those two. But really, when we start the game, the two are sort of at a standstill right there. They butt heads here and there. You might have parties raiding across the border here and there, but they're kind of, I guess, content for the moment. And where we were really seeing a lot of struggle is within the kingdoms themselves, like the noble houses of Splendour, the orcish clans. And Splendour itself is just coming out of, well, not just coming out, but had a recent civil war. And so there's still a lot of tension that was built up between them. And I think Ted wanted to elaborate on some of that stuff.
No, I didn't want to. I just wanted to make sure you mentioned the civil war. So it's peaceful, except there's just been a war.
Right. So so the biggest conflict you'll see immediately is just that those tensions that have been still simmering from that time, which I think we've been 12 years, if I'm not mistaken, since the Civil War ended. King Basilius was the winner of the war. He deposed the old king, Davros. And he married an elvish lady, which, if you guys are not that familiar with our lore, whenever two different races have a child, it's always the same race as the mother. So that means that Splendour, which is, historically been human, is now going to have an elvish heir, in next 20, 30, however long the king lives, years. So there's a lot of tension building up on that front as well. And even the people who back Basilius now have some doubts themselves as if they made the right choice.
Wow. So this is the environment that the player begins in. Is there a chance for the player to get involved at this level of the game, or is this just the background and it's always going to be this way, kind of no matter what you do in the game? And I ask only because I know it's important for you guys, the developers, to tell the players, you're not the savior of right. So I'm kind of wondering, like, where's the upper limit on that? Maybe Ted, you can share a little light on that.
Well, I mean, the what Victor described is, pretty much canon. Like, that is going to be the situation when you begin the game. How it evolves, and elves actually tend to have twins, and so there are actually two princes. So that's going to be an issue as to who's going to take the throne. Certainly the old guard of Splendour is kind of upset that they would be ruled by one elf, let alone two elves. So that's really going to be the situation. You do definitely have an involvement at that stage, but like the king marrying an elf queen and having these kids is something that happened before you came along. So you don't have any involvement in that stage. Almost every step after that, you do have an involvement, potentially.
So after a civil war, it's been 12 years later, and everything is war-torn?
Not quite. I mean, it's been long enough where the regions that did, take the most, casualties or whatever, have sort of recovered. There are houses that are still struggling, like the house that the former king was from, House Mulvarin. They've really been struggling for the last several years, so they're looking to kind of get back to where they were, seeking a little bit of extra power. But for the most part, most of the houses are in good shape going into this.
So I'm wondering what prompted the king to marry, I guess, an outsider. Is kind of what it seems like, and I hate to kind of put it this way, due to sensitivities, but I mean, we are looking at a situation where there's a racial outsider coming in and will become the ruler, and of course, those tensions are, racial by nature, but also, it's also cultural by it's a little bit deeper than just race. It's cultural too. These folks are looking at, in the future, their way of life is likely going to be replaced by an elven way of life. So, I mean, can you get into, why the king made a move like that?
The simplest answer is love. That he fell in love with her. So it wasn't probably, arguably, politically the smartest decision, but he fell in love with her. So it's fairly simple. I think that there are probably going to be arguments that there were other things at play, but I think anybody who's in the palace knows that they are deeply in love with each other.
Okay, so that's good. I'm glad we can kind of put our thumb on that because, one of the things that, if you look back in history, you see things like this, obviously.
Yeah.
And, a lot of those marriages are just arranged. So I'm sort of wondering, like, well, it's after a war, maybe this elven kingdom, came to this king and said, look, we'll help you financially out of some of your debt, but you got to marry the daughter. And then, not knowing too much about the culture, had two sons, and
there's the part where it is. I'll just say it is love, but it's not love without pluses.
Got it. So it's a love, and there's also a convenience.
Yeah.
Got it. Wow, I love the intrigue. Speaking of love, and that's kind of what I'm trying to drill down into is how much of the intrigue are we going to get?
Well, she definitely. If you talk about the king and queen of She, they have much more of the classic medieval, like a marriage of to set up a situation for political purposes, and they really don't like each other. But Splendour, they do.
Hence Splendour.
Yeah. Well, it was called Splendour before they got married, but
yeah. But I did notice the term being is that on purpose? Are things in Splendour, a little bit more idyllic, or is that just how did you come up with the term or the name Splendour?
So it actually came up from a novel called The Sun and Splendour. And that's really where it came from. So there was a medieval king who had his shield be the sun and splendor, which is, obviously the sun emblem, and it was extra spicy, and it was called the Sun and Splendor.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So what do you think, or what do you hope will draw players into the story of this world being created?
Blake?
Yeah, I can take that one. So obviously, since there's no main quest line, I feel like what we personally want to pull players in with is just how detailed the world is, like how each area of the archipelago has its own things going on, its own like politics and political intrigue, and different histories that have gone into it, and how it's changed hand many times. And then we've got aiming for relatively large amount of lore books, so we're wanting players to be able to really dig into the history. Not just kind of interact with, with the main quest line, just kind of toss it aside, but really immerse in the world and feel like they're part of something much larger. So I feel like what will really bring players into it is just how much lore we've written and how deep and complex it is. Because I can guarantee you, the depth. Yeah, I can guarantee you that you won't even scratch the surface in one playthrough. Like you would have to do multiple playthroughs because so much of it is contained to specific areas.
Okay. All right. So the more you explore, the more lore and the more lore you kind of soak in.
Mm-hmm. I will say one thing I'm really interested in seeing is actually the opposite of that. The players that don't really interact with the faction storylines that we're writing or the world events, and just kind of let that all play out in the background too. Because even though we've talked about how you can be involved, you can change things around, you cannot, if you want, and just see that world moving in the background and see, who's coming out on top, just on their own merits and all that kind of crazy stuff that can happen too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Victor, because I was trying to find a way to ask, what if I don't want to read any of the lore books? How do you...
You have to.
You must read.
Joke.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
basically at that point, that's when the VGM really comes into play, right? And if whatever sort of quests you start to dive into, the VGM then kind of starts stringing those little plot lines together with, other quests that you might be ringing into. So like, say you help out one farmer, go find his cow or whatever. Later on, you might be in another part of the world doing something, and the VGM might take that narrative thread of that farmer that you helped out before and suddenly toss him in there, and all of a sudden it's a callback to something else you experienced. And so you can kind of weave your own, individual narrative within this world instead of just experiencing the ones that we have written out.
Right. Blake,
but as far as like the reading a lot, makes me think of the very first Bethesda game that I ever worked on, where we had a great editor that you could write a ton of text and create a this whole background story for what you're supposed to be doing. And I wrote, a lot, and I had like funny comments going back and forth, and dialogue was going on for days, and everyone was just like, tap tap, go past it. I have to collect 3 of these things, and I'm going to go out in the field and do that. And I was like, need to be brief. It made me a better writer, because I was like, okay, gamers do not want to read a ton. Yeah. So, like, give them the option. Like, a book is great. Like, you can read through it, but like, do not make your dialogue things super long.
I like how you noted that it made you a better writer. I guess you kind of had to think about things in a more concise manner to get the point across. Yeah.
Yeah. No, like my favorite lines of dialogue in games and movies and TV and whatever tend to be concise.
Yeah. Blake, let's over to you on more of this.
Yeah. So I think a lot of a problem that a lot of us have had with RPGs in general is that NPCs either know everything about a world or nothing about a world. They don't really have, certain levels of knowledge about the world. You can't really learn much from them if they know nothing, and then you learn too much if they know everything. So The way that we've sort of structured it in our game is, even if the player doesn't want to read lore books, but they still want to find out about the world they're in, like they still want to immerse in it, if you talk to a random peasant, they'll have some information about what most peasants deal with, like their lifestyle or things that they're familiar with, or sort of their view of things. Like they may view religion as slightly more mythological, but if you talk to a noble, they might view it as more something down to earth and more spiritual, but they'll have more information about that sort of way of life, but they'll have sort of a biased view of like, well, maybe peasants see it this way. So you can still get an idea of how people view different things without actually having to read, hundreds of pages of information. So you can absorb the information more organically.
Yeah, I like that approach, and there is something here that you kind of you brought attention to, which is that in games, or even TV shows, I've seen this too in movies, where there's a lot of world building that happens through dialogue, and you end up talking to or interacting with characters that just know a tremendous amount of history. Regular people, walking around just happen to know a tremendous amount of history. And I've always found that to be like very counter to what actually happens in life. You talk to a person, they don't remember what the heck happened last week on the news, let alone 100 years ago. And that's even if they're a history major, and then you're talking to, stable boy A, and he's like, oh, well, sit down, lad, and let me tell you all about, the great War of the Roses, 300 years ago and how it led to here.
Right. I was talking to Julian about this last week. Sharon K. Penman is one of my favorite writers, but she does historic fiction, and but it is like sometimes obnoxious, because she does a ton of research, but it's always like, hey, Victor, I haven't seen you since 12:15 when we met at the council of so-and-so, and you did this, and this was what was decided. And you're like, yeah, okay, I know you did the research, but that's not how people talk to each other.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what I'm calling attention to. And so, is there an awareness of that while building out the narrative in this game, or do you kind of just jump all in? Blake, you want to take that?
Yeah, so there's definitely an awareness to it. I think even more than there was at one point. So a good friend of mine, Chris Avalone, I don't know if you've heard of him. I'm sure people listening to this podcast will know who he is. There's a sentiment I've often heard him echo is, if you have an interesting story to tell, break it up and spread it across multiple characters you can interact with. So this is sort of where writing and design intersect in a way that a lot of I guess green developers, you could say, make the mistake of just exposition dumping like the player. If they want to tell a story and they're like, oh, I've got this really cool idea, I want to tell the player about it. Sit down for 15 minutes and cycle through this dialogue. Hope you enjoy this. Instead of breaking it up and trying to give it to the player and say a lore book and a conversation with an NPC and some environmental storytelling for the player to sort of get really immersed in it, instead of sitting through 15 different dialogue trees, clicking different options for half an hour. So yeah, we're definitely very mindful of how stories are presented to players, and definitely how they're presented from the perspective of who they're talking to. So you may get a different view of a specific event in history from someone of a different social class than you would from another, or someone of a different age, or someone of a different race.
And obviously the dialogue is going to also be based on your reputation with them, and, a lot of other things. So how much they give to you, it can vary.
I wanted to add on there that Michael, who I'm sure viewers are familiar with now, our lead designer, he's also insisted that NPCs have what's the term, I guess patience or whatever, only so much patience to give you. They're not going to sit there and just talk to you over and over and over. Eventually they're going to say, okay, well, I got to go now. So, talk to you later. So that whole just sitting there and just going through exposition after exposition, that's not really going to be a thing.
I always think of the maid with a bucket on her head who's going off to some place, and you're like, so let's talk for a while. And she's like, oh my God.
I have 5 gallons of water on my head, man. Can we keep it moving? That's interesting to hear. And how is that going to work? Is as you're kind of chewing off the ear of this NPC, or are they just going to be like, all right, listen, I'm leaving now. Goodbye. How is that going to work out?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much that. It also depends.
See, Victor, you brought it up.
It also depends on their regard for you, how they view your reputation with them. So if it's someone that, really has a high regard for you, then yeah, they'll probably entertain you a little longer. But if it's, just your average person that you're just stopping on the street, then, they got things to do. They're not going to spend that much time.
Yeah, like Leonardo DiCaprio landed in front of you, was asking questions. You might give him a little more time.
Right. I might ask him, about climate change.
And he'll give you the whole history, as we all know. That's how people talk. So
I think he talked my ear off.
But some person you don't know showing up and bugging you while you're on your way to do something else, you might I'll give you 5 minutes. I'll be nice, but move on.
Not going to ask that guy about climate change.
Sure.
Hey, go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, so I did have something to add to this. I'm sorry we keep veering into design. It's just the two fields intersect a lot.
Let's do it.
So I know a lot of people in the community have been very curious. We've talked about it in Discord quite a lot, but for those that aren't in it, they're very curious of can you free chat with NPCs? Can you just type with it, since we have an LLM? So the answer to that is no. I believe we covered that before. But the system that Victor's referring to, it's interest and regard. So interest is how how interested the NPC is in talking to the player, and things like reputation and regard can affect that. But interest also serves as a way to sort of limit the LLM from just hallucinating the most random crap on the planet within the confines of what it's been programmed with. And one part of this that I found really interesting is it forces you to pay attention to what an NPC is saying. Obviously, we'll have like a chat log that says what they've said, but you can't click the same keyword more than once and then repeat themselves. So you have to pay active attention to what they're saying, and you've only got a limited amount of time to do things in dialogue as far as interactions. So like if you click one keyword, you have to look through that information and click the next one, but you can't go back and click it again.
Wow. I feel like that's some really key information there for listeners, because I'm not sure if they've heard about that mechanic specifically. So you got to pay attention when you're talking to NPCs, because you got a limited amount of time and you can't go back and touch on that keyword again. Interesting. I wonder how that's going to play out in early access coming up. I wonder how that's going to play out.
Well, admittedly, it'll be limited at first, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, early access, we don't have the time to get the systems fully fleshed out. So we'll see how far we do get, how in depth we can get. But obviously, as early access progresses, we'll be able to add more and more complexity to those systems. So it's really a bit up in the air at the moment.
I want to get Ted, Victor, and then Blake. I'm going to ask you the same question, and I want to get your take on this question. Okay, we've been chatting for about 25 minutes now on, this and that regarding the lore of the archipelago, but I really want to know, in your opinion, first Ted, then Victor, then Blake, what what are the major factors going on in the archipelago that are going to affect the player when they start the game? What narratively speaking, what are some of those factors? If you give me one, that's great. Two, that's fine. Let's start with Ted.
I'll go with the obvious big one. It's what we call a world event. The king is going to die, and we are not sure when. It could be sooner, it could be later. But that's going to affect a lot of stuff. So that is probably what immediately springs to mind as far as a major event that the player's going to have to deal with in one way or another.
The King of Splendour?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's... Wow. I could, from just a little bit you've told me already, that's that's going to ignite some stuff. Those tensions that Victor had brought up. Victor, on to you. What do you think?
I think it's gonna kind of depend on which noble house you decide to align yourself with, and some of the other bigger factions. Because again, we do have like storylines that we're writing out for all the major factions, and they've all kind of got their individual goal that they want to do. So it's kind of up to you with what you want to do with your character. If you want to say, let's say support House Mulvarn that I talked about, that's, down and out right now. Like obviously their goal is to get back into power, and they're probably going to be doing some shady stuff, on their way there. So really depending on who you ally with yourself with that's going to be the factor that's going to really, I guess, inform the way your story is going to go.
That alliance, how early does that happen in the game?
Well, I guess as early as you want, but it's not something where, you walk into the Duke's castle and you have a chat with him and you're like his friend now, right? You have to start at the bottom and sort of work your way up through the ranks, and eventually the Duke will have enough confidence in you where he's going to bring you into his fold and, maybe ask you to do some of those more important quests in order to help out his house.
Got it. So almost from the gate, you can start working on something like that. Blake, over to you on this. What do you think are some of the large narrative factors that can make their way down to affect directly the player?
I think it really depends on how the player wants to interact with the world. So we've got, like, obviously for early access, we have 5 factions on IJR. You can choose to not interact with them, but there's a world event that you can interact with, or you can avoid the world event entirely and interact with one specific faction that aligns with what you want, or you can play between them. Like go back and forth and say, well, I want to do this for this faction, but they're doing this, so I'm going to go behind their back and do this. It really depends on how the player wants to interact with the world. Obviously, world events are a key one, and those will tie into if the player is aligned with a faction, or if they play the game without being aligned to a faction. So that was kind of the whole point of not having a main story, is the player doesn't necessarily need to engage with any of the narrative bits. They can engage with the systems.
Got it. On to races for the moment. Ted, can you tell us what the races are in the game and what makes them unique from one another?
Oh, each race? You want me to run by each race?
Well, I think maybe the playable ones.
Sure. Well, I mean, for early access, it's humans and orcs. Okay. And we can go into the other ones if you'd like. Humans are the original race. Orcs are the race that is had been in charge of the archipelago for a long time. Orcs are much tougher than humans. They're larger. And you want me to go through well, those are the 2 races I think we have for EA.
Sure.
Am I correct, Victor?
Go through the rest? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I can go through the rest, but like, we don't have those for EA.
I mean, I guess we can just list them for everybody. It's eight playable races in total. That'll be for the full game. That's humans, elves, dwarfs, orcs, ogres, goblins, Cambion, and Fae. And like Ted said, orcs, they're the tougher race. They've been through those hardships. They can withstand a lot. Humans are
willpower, I think, is their thing.
Well, I guess their willpower, each one gets a major stat boost, right? So orcs is endurance. Humans are willpower because we're humans. We sort of set our minds on stuff and then don't give up until we accomplish it, right?
Right.
Elves are perception. Obviously, they got good hearing, good eyesight. That's just the elvish kind of trope, right, that we play with. Dwarfs are dexterity. In this case, they're really good craftsmen, right? So they're sort of like nimble fingered. So that's the kind of dexterity that we're talking about with them. Orcs, who said toughness. Ogres are strength because they are the largest race. So big, giant, tough guys is what they are. Goblins are speed. They're small, lighter framed. They're able to move the fastest out of all the races. Then we've got Cambion, which, for those who aren't familiar, Cambion and Fae are born seemingly at random to any race. It could happen to anyone, right? So both of those have kind of always been ostracized by society. The Cambion happen to be the more like demonic looking ones, while the Fae are, more majestic looking. So the Cambion actually have a bonus to their intelligence because it's basically the smartest ones are the ones that survive. If they don't got good wits about them, then they kind of fall prey to society and their dislike for them. And then Fae are charismatic because they have this like beautiful marbly looking skin, these sort of gemstone colored eyes. So they're like really like beautiful to look at, even though like people still don't trust them because they're definitely not natural, right? But they do have that. Yeah, they have that exotic charisma about them that really intrigues people.
I am eating all this up, guys. This is amazing stuff. Does anyone take like a hit to a stat? I mean, they get, so obviously ogres got a bump to their strength stat. do they take an intelligence hit?
No, so one of the things that
No.
Ted really wanted from the beginning is not to punish players for, you know, preferring an ogre over a Cambion, right? Like, we really want to just give bonuses and say, like, this is what makes your race unique. But just because you want to play it, there shouldn't be a negative because you want to play that race. So it's more like encouraging for people to try out these different races and see what they like the best.
Can a player assign stats to their character and then give themselves that challenge? Like if they want to make, you know, let's just say they want to make an ogre paladin and give them, like, you know, less intelligence just to be a goof. Is that something that players can do? I see Blake is holding up his hand here. On to you for this one, I guess.
Let's let the man talk.
Yeah, so that's the idea. So we've got a boons and banes system similar to the disadvantages and advantages system in Daggerfall. So if players want a challenge to play throughout the entire game, like we had one that was kind of inspired by Mad Max Thunderdome, where you could play as a more brutish character. So you get a huge boon to strength, but you get a huge hit to intelligence. So you might walk around and everyone might talk to you. If you've done low intelligence builds in Fallout 1 and 2, people might talk to you and like, you know, you kind of lesser intelligence. Everyone might talk to you in that sort of same way, but they may also be a little bit more lenient on you in combat. So like, oh, I feel kind of bad for him. I won't do anything. Or I won't kill him, or I won't take this guy out. I feel bad for him. But so you've got, you know, some advantages and disadvantages, and then I think we've got some that are purely just disadvantages, kind of like I think they were called skulls in Halo. If you want something just purely to make the game harder.
I got to jump on this for a second. I love how lore always turns into mechanics for games. Isn't it just amazing how this works? The boon and bane system, I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about this before. Is this like is this similar to like a perk system? Does it just happen in the very beginning of the game? Is this something that we constantly interact with throughout leveling up?
It's something you would constantly interact with. So you can get boons and banes through regular gameplay by interacting with specific systems. Like if you keep getting hit by fire damage, for instance, maybe you could get a boon that's like you're severely susceptible to fire damage, but you take, I don't know, more health if someone hits you with ice damage, for instance. Obviously, it's not really lore accurate, but stuff like that. So you assign them during character creation. We don't have a difficulty setting, so boons and banes are your difficulty. So if you want the game to be harder or easier, you do them through that. I believe you don't even have to select any if you don't want to. And then if you decide, well, I want the game to be harder or easier as you're playing, you may come across those boons and banes. And I believe we have a way for you to get rid of them as well.
I love this so much. I'm getting like a D&D feat kind of a feeling off of this. Is this kind of hitting the mark a little bit? Am I way off? Am I kind of close? The feat?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
Well, D&D is always pretty close to mark.
Yep.
I love that so much.
Yeah,
getting excited and giddy over here. Like, I got to calm myself down.
It's one of the things that we went back to with this game is, like, if you look at a lot of modern RPGs, like I think we did a social media post on this that I wrote, but a lot of modern RPGs ignore tabletop games. That's really where the really interesting systems are, because the tabletop landscape has been around for decades. So there's really interesting systems there that translate really well to video games. That's why, like, CRPGs and video game RPGs exist.
Love it. I love all of that. Oh my gosh. Okay. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Calm yourself down. All right. Are there any races in the game that players can't play? You know, so I don't know. I'm walking around in the forest, and I come upon some sort of, you know, race that I could interact with, have a dialogue with, but this is a non-playable race. Anything like that happening in the game? Go ahead, Blake.
So I think one thing that we've tried to avoid is presenting the player with like lore specific encounters of like, oh, there's this really cool thing, but sorry, you can't do that. The only one I can think of, and Victor, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, are giants. I believe we do have giants, but there's just no way that those would be viable in most video games.
Well, and even then, giants are a bit more bestial, right? They're you can sort of compare them a bit to like say gorillas or chimps, where they are smart. They sort of have their group dynamics and they can kind of communicate with each other, but for the most part, they're not, building stone structures and having voting systems or anything like that, right? So they are they are more of a bestial nature.
Maybe for Wayward Realms too.
Yeah, the rise of the giants.
Yeah, we'll have giants in Parliament.
Yeah, and
If they can
I guess to sort of add to what Blake was saying, we really, one of the things, like say World of Warcraft for me is like where this hits home the most is like every like 2 or 3 enemies that you ran across like was intelligent. They sort of had their own little civilization. They had huts and clothing and their own weapons, and you just go through and you murder all these people and you never learn anything about them whatsoever, right? And that's something we really wanted to avoid. Like obviously we brought in like the goblins, the orcs, and the ogres that people are used to having to just fight. There are those enemies that you never learn anything about, but they obviously have a language, they have a people, they have families. And, I've always been like, what's going on with them? What's the stories with them? So that's sort of what we've done with Wayward Realms is take those races, like those 8 races, and we say,
You're so woke.
these are the intelligent beings of the world. And we want to like dive into their cultures and stuff. And it also helps us avoid monocultures, right? Because if you've got like 30 different types of races, you're kind of limited as to what you can do with them. So they wind up just being, these are the fox samurai people, and these are, the gorilla, South American people. So instead we get to really like say like these races have bunches of different cultures throughout the world, and if we go explore them in different games, we'll see a different side to these people that we didn't know existed before. So that'll be a lot of fun.
I like that very much, how the races persist throughout the archipelago, but environmental differences may inform their culture. Yeah, it's obviously true to life. Life lived in Maine is very different than life lived in Arizona. But they're still humans.
Exactly.
So
Arguably,
I do want to.
Go ahead, Victor.
Sorry, I do want to say there is one race that we have, and if you've been part of the community for a long time, then you actually pushed for this to be a thing, and that is crab people. They do exist out in the world. They're a very mysterious race. You may or may not learn anything about them while you play. We'll see. But they are out there. They're the only exception to our rule there.
So Victor, I got to ask you this regarding that. You mentioned World of Warcraft. You mentioned the beast races. I'm assuming you left the Murlocs in World of Warcraft, but you may have added them anyway with the crabs. The crabs,
they may or not go. There you go.
Are we going to hear that when we get too close to a crab person area?
Only if we get you to do the recording for it.
I'm your man.
You're pretty good.
Blake, over to you. I know. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Victor did kind of, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. Victor kind of already touched on what I was going to say, but I guess I can say it anyway. So a big problem with RPGs as well is like, if there are multiple playable races in games, they don't really have distinct cultures. Like, it's like the humans live in this architecture and they do this stuff, and the orcs do this. But from the beginning of the development, we were like, let's change that. So yeah, as Victor mentioned, there are different cultures. Like we have the Jungarians, which are kind of like a steppe tribe inspired by Mongolians. So you've got that culture that's prevalent in the archipelago, and then you've got cultures that are more akin to like medieval Britain or France or even Spain or India. So there's a lot of very distinct cultures in each race. Even orcs are like this. Orcs have different cultures for each of the clans. They have different ways of life. Like we've got one that's very pious. We've got another that's kind of like a Mad Max road warrior in a fantasy setting. That was Victor's faction. I can see him smiling over there. And the elves too. Like we've got like the light elves and the dark elves. They've got distinct cultures, and they've got cultures that are distinct in their own houses as well.
Interesting. All right. I want to jump over to the environment because as we noted before, the environment really kind of informs the culture here. Is the archipelago, Ted, is the archipelago an environmentally diverse place? And if so, what sort of biomes could players find themselves in?
A lot. I think it was like 7 or 8 that we identified as being like distinct biomes. But obviously there's a mixture of different ones along the way. I think that's about right. Like, but you're not going to get that on early access. Like maybe we have like 2 in iJar. Just because it's a tiny little island.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, are we talking about the range from Arctic to thick jungle and arid desert?
Victor, jump in here. I don't think that it's not going to be like Arctic or jungle. It's going to be like there's a lot of stuff in between there.
Yeah, for the most part, it's environments you find in, say, like Western Europe, right? She is the colder region, so you do get a bit more of like that sort of like rocky, craggy kind of locations up there,
like northern Scotland, kind of a feel.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but like you can get into fjords and there's a lot of stuff.
But and then it runs down to say like more like a temperate temperate rainforest, right? Like sort of like you get Pacific Northwest kind of foresty where you might have that like rainfall and stuff, but it's not a jungle, right? It would still be like the pines and that kind of foliage there.
Got it.
The only really crazy exception would be Marathwir, which for folks who don't know, Marathwir is actually a chunk of seabed that got raised up out of the ocean. So it's a desert because it's just seafloor, right? And it's sort of full of the stranger creatures and sights to see there, since it is that is our more otherworldly.
And like the craziest bones you've ever seen.
Yeah, we got fossilized giant shells, whale bones, dead coral reefs, kind of all strewn throughout the land. So that's sort of our crazier environment. Other than that, it's just sort of like more Western European staples, like your forests, swamps, marshlands, that kind of typical thing. Oh, and I did want to add, like, we don't have an Arctic environment, but we do have seasons. So throughout the year, you'll see, that snowfall come in the winter time, gives way to spring and all the flowers and stuff like that. So you'll see that landscape itself change as well. So it's not always just the same biome, and every time you step into it, it's the exact same weather.
I can hear the Daggerfall snowfall music in my ear right now. Good old Eric Heberling is calling.
That's right. Eric is on the line. Well, he's not on the line, but
he's out there. I hear
he's out there.
So do these environments, do they present like unique challenges to the player? So if I'm in a particularly cold area, am I going to be less effective with my weapons because I'm cold and need to put on an extra layer? Am I going to run through, am I going to be like hungrier because I'm in a warmer environment?
Well, the weirdest thing that happened in the last 30 years is that became a thing. Like, it was not a thing in Daggerfall.
Right.
And in fact, Scorpia, who was the most famous, game, reviewer at the time, was like, "Don't you dare do that." And then it became a thing of like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do like." You need to like dress warmer for this environment and stuff like that. And you need to worry about what you're eating and all that stuff. And she's like, that's not heroic, but it's become the thing. So it's not going to be the default, but it will be a choice.
I like how it's a choice. So I not to bring it up, but I think I kind of have to in this conversation now. There was a mod for Skyrim which recently became a major factor in that game, which was the environmental effects, and you can always turn it on when you make a new player. I tried it once, and I really am not a fan of the way that it is in Elder Scrolls, the way it is in Skyrim. I think it goes a little too far, where you got to sleep, you got to eat, but I think it would be interesting to have to account for, okay, I'm in a cold environment, I should probably put on an extra something because
you should be going shirtless and in a loincloth through a cold environment.
Right. Even Conan wears boots in the in the Arctic,
Furry boots.
So I was wondering, how much of that is there. So I mean, is it the case where like you're going to have to monitor your hunger and your sleep if you turn that on, or you're not sure yet?
Well, should I tell him what I think, Victor? You know what I'm thinking.
Go for
it. I also think if we're going to go to that level of realism, then you need to think about where you're going to pee and poo.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm just saying.
You're definitely not wrong about it. I mean, it's
just saying.
It's not right, but it's not wrong.
Well, I'm just saying, if like you want that level of realism, then I'm gonna pile on the realism.
I don't want to have to figure out where I'm going to dig to squat.
That's right. I know. This is not my way of playing the game, but if you're that player, then I'm gonna pile it on.
Okay. Great. Blake, go ahead. Over to you.
Yeah. So just to clarify on something. So Ted's saying that we would like to offer like an optional like survival mode that would be completely different gameplay wise from the base game experience. And Victor, feel free to deck me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe in the past in design we have talked about introducing some pseudo survival elements into the game. So wearing heavier clothing in colder areas might give you specific stat boosts, whereas if you're wearing lighter clothing in colder areas, you might get specific stat negatives. And then obviously like sleeping will help regenerate health. Eating, you don't have to worry about hunger, but if you eat, it can regenerate health faster. Give you some stat boosts in combat, like if you're well fed, or and then I believe one thing we've talked about with the community is you'll get specific stat boosts and boons from sleeping in different places. So say you sleep in an inn, you might get something kind of like well rested that you see in Bethesda games usually, where you might get specific like stat boosts for that. But if you sleep outside, you might get specific stat negatives and specific stat boosts, things like that.
All right. Back on, kind of switching gears a little bit here on the narrative. Obviously, the world found in Wayward Realms is going to be compared to Tamriel and Elder Scrolls, at least in the outset. Is there a difference between the narrative found in the Archipelago versus in Tamriel? And if so, what do you think those differences are? Ted, you mind picking that up?
I mean, I would start off with magic. There is magic, but it's rare because to me, magic is not really cool unless it's not everywhere. And definitely in Elder Scrolls, we made magic like Mage's Guild around every quarter. So I think that's where we kind of began with that.
Right. I'm talking maybe more about tonally. So you've got so tonal narrative, right? You've got Tolkien, and then you've got George R.R. Martin, two totally different tones, fantastic worlds. Tonally, Tamriel is a certain way. Is the Wayward Realms, going to be kind of close to Tamriel in tone narratively, or is there an extra aspect that you added to it after all of your experience?
I mean, tonally, as far as like the world, I think even in the beginning, and I think maybe the Elder Scrolls slipped from this. It was probably before George Martin wrote the books. It was kind of that same political situation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Before he wrote the books, so. I mean, that's certainly my mentality is like I understand how politics work and how, it's worked over the years. So it's going to be a political situation, which I guess is probably the Martin background stuff.
Yeah. Got it. Maybe a little more George R.R. Martin than Tolkien. And that's not to say that the tone you find in Elder Scrolls even now is close to Tolkien at all. But it's definitely not the grounded and gritty.
Yeah. I think we're going to be grittier than them.
Yeah. That you feel it. You feel the ground. You feel it grounded and gritty in Daggerfall for sure. You feel it,
yeah.
And it's not completely gone in Morrowind, but if anything,
but by the time we get to Skyrim, it's gone.
Oh, it's out the door.
Yeah,
and it's more pop culture fantasy than it is. It's still enjoyable. My son loves it. But still it's not the grit that was there from Daggerfall. So I'm wondering if that's tonally gonna be there. Okay.
Victor, can you add some more grit?
let me go get some from the back.
Yeah, I know you will.
Yeah, I do want to add on there that I think tonally you can compare it to the Elder Scrolls, but it would be Daggerfall as opposed to the later games.
Yeah. Got and certainly grounded where Morrowind is anything but grounded, and purposefully so.
Sure.
All right. In what ways will the story of the Archipelago be told to players? Via in-game book, unique artifacts, maybe in-world vignettes, all of the above?
All the above.
Yeah. Go ahead, Blake.
I was just going to say all of the above.
All right.
I'm sorry, Blake. Oh, buddy, I stepped on you.
You stole my line, Ted.
Right.
Can I say all of the above too?
Go for it.
But to add a little more context on there, even one of the things that we're planning is descriptions on weapons and armor and items and stuff like that to sort of give you a little bit of the history of the world and who might be using that kind of armor, where it originates from, that kind of stuff. So it's really you'll find a little bit sort of everywhere, whether it's talking to NPCs or reading a book or, whatever you learn through a faction quest line, or just the items themselves. You'll be injecting, or we'll be injecting little bits of narrative and story and world building into everything.
All right. Now, in what ways do we see the story of the Archipelago reflected in itemization or even magic spells?
Well, I guess magic spells is a little bit harder in that sense because, like, there is a history with magic in the world, but for the most part, the world has shunned it, right? So in magic, you sort of get that, I guess, more of the occult look at stuff, and the secrets of the world, as opposed to the open history and stuff that most people are familiar with because they don't dabble in magic, and they see that as a bad thing. Meanwhile, like, say, other itemizations and things like that, like, you'll learn the histories, where these things come from, what inspires them, what cultures are responsible for them. So you'll see it in that sense with those.
All right. Blake, Ted, and you want to weigh in on that before we move on? We got a new section here I want to debut on the show. Hope you guys like it.
Looking forward to it.
Does it involve spinning a wheel?
I love surprises. I guess we did touch on some of how things would be conveyed to players during was it the it was the previous few episodes with Michael and I with things like the context box, which I guess is what you could consider vignettes. So you've got things like that, and then I don't know if I have talked about abstract quests.
I don't remember hearing it. No.
Okay, so I give this example on Discord a lot. So when I was developing the first iteration of the quest system with Michael and another one of our writers / designers, came up with a concept of abstract quests, which is just a fancy name. So they're quests that don't require the player to interact with NPCs, but the world itself. So the example I like to use, this is minor spoiler territory for the full game, so avert your ears if you don't want to hear any spoilers. So there's a series of lore books. It's say maybe 25. You read through them, you start to notice that there are descriptions of landmarks that you might have seen as you've traveled the archipelago, and as you search out the rest of these books, you eventually find out that there's symbolism at the locations, and upon digging into it, you might find fractions of maps, and you put the map together, and you're able to deduce a location of where the final part in the book takes place, and you find out that there's a hidden crypt there, and you go through the crypt and find this weapon that everybody in the archipelago knows about. So there's an element of environmental storytelling there that's deeply rooted in the lore itself. Obviously, there will be far fewer abstract quests, as those require a lot of handcrafted details. There's other ways as well, like if you've ever played Dwarf Fortress, I know a couple of people on our team are huge Dwarf Fortress fans. Yeah, Dwarf Fortress.
Did you say dwarf?
Yeah, dwarf.
Dwarf. Don't say dwarf. Dwarf.
I said dwarf, Ted. This isn't another library incident. Nobody's going to understand that. Anyway, in that game, every piece of environmental storing detail is procedurally generated, so that'll be tied into all of our systems. So we'll have ruins of cultures that used to be on the archipelago that are from Lavinium or other places in the world that are now gone, but there's remnants of okay, maybe there was a war here, or there was a fire here and they tried to flee, things like that.
No, that's a big thing with our art director. He's very into environmental storytelling.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I've heard this word. I don't know if this is an industry-wide term for it, called in-game vignettes, but I've heard that used before, and it's environmental storytelling where you come into an area and clearly there's stuff going on all around the ground, and it tells the story if you really look closely at what had happened. And I'm so happy to hear that this is going to be a feature of the game, an important one, because it's one of my, whenever I see it in a game, it's I love it.
No, yeah, it can be really subtle and it can be major. So
yeah. All right. So I'm very excited to move into this next section. All right, because obviously right now it's not going to mean much, but later on in the podcast, I think we're going to have to talk about our gameplay. And I think it's good to acknowledge to our listeners now that this is the direction that we want to take the show. We want to acknowledge that the game is being played by your developers, and that they have adventures too, and it's fun to share those adventures. Whether you're developing the game or you're a consumer and you're playing the game, it's just fun to talk about. But obviously, the game's not out, so how do we do this? So once per month, I'm going to be asking a question of our intrepid heroes, the developers of the Wayward Realms, that might be gameplay related. And then later, as early access comes out, we're going to be talking about what we did, maybe a story that we had in the game, and share it with one another, something to kind of laugh over. So this month's question, and I'd like to go Ted, Victor, and then Blake. What's something you're working toward that you're excited for players to try?
Well, if I go first, I'm big into failure. So like I'm looking forward to people not succeeding in their quests, but making it more interesting when they actually don't succeed. So like the storyline continuing but being better because you didn't do the like you're going to rescue the princess from the castle. You've like killed the princess along the way, and it became a better, more interesting story because of that.
Got it.
That's, to me, would be the best.
That's you're working on that right now, the feature of failing forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask how you're working on that? What are you like? In what way are you, Ted, specifically making sure that feature of failing forward comes to players?
Because you have to give alternatives to die. So, like, if you're being chopped down in a dungeon and then all of a sudden, these nuns come and capture you and bring you back to their castle and they're like, resurrecting you, like, that would be really cool.
That would be cool. I look forward to being thrown in jail and jail broken by nuns. That'd be
and it'll be just like Holy Grail, where they're like, we're all
but for legality purposes, it's not called anthrax. We'll call it heroin or something else.
I've unfortunately been working with these guys for a while, so like they get me.
Okay, Victor. What's something you're working on? What's something that you're working toward that you're excited for players to try?
So, like gameplay wise, I think I'm really excited, and this is kind of something that I just enjoy doing myself in games, but just for players to wander the world, whether that be like on horseback or by ship. I designed both systems for those, and obviously in early access we'll have, it won't be fully fleshed out yet, but I think it'll be a lot of fun and really interesting and just fun to navigate this world. One of the things that I really like to do in worlds for some reason is to just ride around on a horse and really take in all the scenery. Unfortunately, most worlds, like, you do that for 5 minutes and you've already reached the end of the world, right? So now with this big, massive scale, I really want to see, I guess, other people like me just really enjoy that vastness and take in all these beautiful sights that we're building and just really like get to soak it all in.
Ted?
Well, I was going to say, and Victor is also working on the cards.
The cards?
Well, That's not, well, it's Ted's design. Somebody else is programming it, and I'm doing the artwork for it. So for a card game.
It's our within the game.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. Oh, this is great. I was asking about this a couple of months ago. That's incredible. So there's going to be an in-game card game? Oh, it's badass. That's so cool.
And Victor is doing the artwork for it.
Oh my gosh. How many cards are going to be in the game?
53?
Something like that. I don't remember the exact count.
And how do you collect them?
We're not going to get into this right now, but Victor is very excited about it.
Yeah, I gotta push. It's my job to push the button.
I know. We'll talk about it later.
I'm so excited about this. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's incredible. Wow. Thank you so much. What a wonderful idea. That's going to be fun to kind of like wander the world and try and find these things. And that's going to be great. Okay. Blake, on to you. What's something that you're working toward or that you're working on that you're excited for players to play, get their fingers in?
Victor, I'm really excited for them to mess around with that lantern I'm modeling for you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm definitely really excited for players to get their hands on proper RPG system oriented quests. Like our lead narrative designer, he's huge fan of Fallout New Vegas. That game was tremendous in its approach to open-ended quests. He's also the lead writer on a smaller project called Ardenfell. If you like Morrowind, you should check that out. It's a really cool game.
That's my favorite. My favorite Fallout game was New Vegas.
Yeah, mine as well. It was a great game. Anyway,
smiles.
But yeah, so him and I both come from traditional backgrounds of quest design. So taking those principles of trying to give the players as many choices as possible for quests, even if only 1% of people will see it, is very important because it adds replayability value, but it adds more weight to your choices. And with modern RPGs that are coming out, a lot of the quests are just linear. You've got maybe 1 or 2 decisions that don't really affect anything, but we've got quest lines that intersect, where like you could be like with this one faction and then like sent undercover in another, and they're like, hey, we need you to go kill someone in faction A, and then you go to faction A and they're like, well, you need to go kill this person in faction B. So you're like, well, I don't know, do I want to side with one or the other? Can I play both sides? How do I do this? I've not seen that in RPGs in a very long time, so I'm excited for players to feel like their choices actually matter.
Amazing. That's going to be a lot of fun too, to see if you could play both sides of 2 different factions. That's so you could be like a double agent.
Yeah, or a triple agent.
All right. Well, that's our new gameplay section, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I do want to thank Ted and Victor and Blake for playing along.
Did we win a prize?
Yes, it's this really cool Cambion horn. Don't ask where I got it from.
So I didn't get a trip to the Bahamas. I'm a little disappointed.
Maybe next time.
Okay, I'll have to play again.
So on to we've got 2 more questions. We always like to get the community to weigh in on the show as well. So big shout out to our Discord community. This first one comes from Baron, who wants to talk about balance of magic and sword. And Baron asks, will being a full-time magic user feel just as resourceful as wielding a sword? The one thing about RPGs I hate is I'm usually forced to be a sword wielder. I want to be a magic user, but I can't because mana or magic goes out too fast and I'm overwhelmed.
I mean, my first thing is, how are you playing the game?
Okay.
Victor, tell me if I'm wrong. Like I think if you play the game in our game as a mage early on, it's probably, if you just go storming into dungeons, it's probably not going to work out very well for you.
Okay. Victor?
I mean, I think resourcefulness is the key word there, because it is going to sort of depend on the player and what you do with the magic that you are given, right? Like we have the spell creation system and stuff like that. You can't just go to a store and pick up a new powerful spell that like nukes all the enemies in front of you, right? You're going to have to sort of figure out, what are these spell effects? What can I do with it? How can I mix them up in interesting ways where I can, defend myself against enemies, or, just be a better, I guess, more efficient killer, if you will.
Right.
So it's really going to be up to the player and how resourceful they can be with the magic that they are given.
And Blake.
Yeah, so I'll answer the question in a bit more of a broad way, since Victor and Ted already answered it. So if you're familiar with who Tim Kaine is, he was one of the lead designers on Fallout 1 and 2, helped create the franchise. Well, less Fallout 2. That's a different story. Anyway, so he has a YouTube channel where he talks about his own design philosophies, and he said that his dream game is one where playing as someone that only utilizes speech, just talking to people, is, if that's just as viable a playthrough as being the villain or being the hero, that's when you've created the ultimate RPG. That's sort of his dream game, which he said he doesn't believe.
Why are you quoting Tim Kaine when I've said that?
He said it on recording, Ted. But yeah, I mean, I can attest, Ted has said that as well. But he believes a game like that may never exist. So that's sort of our approach to this game, though. So we want every play style to be a viable play style. That's why we've got class presets that are intended for new players, but you can create your own class, which is how you're really meant to play the game, and sort of find your own play style. So playing as someone that wields magic, it'll have a different difficulty curve to overcome in the beginning versus someone that wants to just go around like murder hoboing and punching people. Or someone that, wants to role play as someone that only uses speech and they go around delivering messages, or they act as a peace broker. All of those should be viable play styles, especially with, having the VGM tailoring gameplay experiences to that. Every play style should feel just as rewarding as another.
So I got to ask, if you have class presets, and then of course the option for a custom class, can you walk me through like what some of those class presets are being thought to be right now?
So we don't have them defined at the moment. I can't get into too much detail on this, as we plan to do something interesting for the community, to say the least. But before early access comes out, we'll be defining some of these classes, but obviously they'll be based around common play styles people like to use, like magic or combat or unarmed or stealth, or speech-based / charisma, things like that.
Will you consider a paladin class?
Only if you fund the game.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do it. Heavy armor, sword and shield, with healing.
Holy, you can't do shit. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk about the paladin for a bit, if that's all right, because it is something that we get a lot of comments about, because it's a very beloved class that people like to play. And
I've heard this.
There's one big problem with it in our setting, and that is that we don't have healing magic, right? So the typical, healing sword and board paladin wouldn't really work, but their magic is often attributed to the goddesses, right? So you can go in that more of divine paladin kind of style, right? Where you are a warrior, but you're doing it for your temple, whichever goddess you ally yourself with. So it'd be more in that sense as opposed to the typical healing paladin.
And devotion to a particular god would grant you magic use?
It's not specific, like you can only use that if you're devoted to this goddess, but there might be some perks for you that we won't get into details about right now.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so our next question is by Inter regarding eavesdropping for quests. And Inter asks, Since the Wayward Realms uses a text-based dialogue system, how do you plan to attract my attention to a significant, new, or interesting quest in the local area?
Victor, you mind if I take this one?
Yeah, you're going to tell him about the little fairy that comes out and says, "Hey, over here." Right?
Well, I guess I don't need to say anything now. Thanks, Victor.
Great.
Yeah, so we plan to do it in multiple ways. As far as eavesdropping goes, we still don't know if we'll be able to do this, but myself and some other designers, I think even Victor at one point, floated the idea of doing floating bark text, so you can see back and forth conversations of NPCs, and the VGM could inject quests that way. They're like, "Hey, did you hear about this guy that got robbed the other night? I hear there's a huge stash of something somewhere." Player can go look into that. We also want to have things like bulletin boards, where you can go and find quests to, like, rescue, I don't know, someone's lost cat or something, or things like that. But especially just talking to NPCs, the whole goal of the VGM having such tight control over NPCs, and kind of how NPCs can develop into fully fleshed out characters, is they're vehicles for quests. So if you go up and walk up to a random person on the street corner, they may not always give you a quest, but there's a pretty high chance that they might bring up a specific keyword that'll lead to a quest. So there'll always be ways to get quests through dialogue, especially since it's keyword based. They could bring up a specific faction that's local to the town, and you might ask them about that faction and say, "Well, I don't know much about it, but you could go here and talk to the faction about it and get quests that way."
Wow, awesome! I especially like the billboard as well. I've used that in my own D&D campaign, and it turned out to be really popular. Where some of my players were like, "Yeah, okay, but what else is going on around here? Let's check the billboard." So
a big thing for me has always been I want all the quests to have a 5-act structure. So, like, the first act needs to set up the action. So before you go off and kill the werewolf, you need to go in the town, and there's like a ton of dead bodies there. Like, you are investigating this is situation. So you're not just getting this out of nowhere.
Wow. So every quest has like a 5-act structure.
Yeah.
Wow. So it definitely. So I know there's some concern about fetch quests too.
Yeah.
So we're not looking like there's going to be a ton of fetch quests in the game.
No.
With a rule like that, that's incredible.
We'll have fetch quests that just be more substance to them than there was in a game like Daggerfall, or later games that just have just straight up go find this and I'll give you a reward.
Yeah, that's fair to say.
There's more motivation behind it.
Okay. All right. Well, that is the 2 questions that we got from Discord for this month. We're going to start closing out the show, folks, and of course, we want to thank you for listening, downloading, and viewing us on all the various outlets. I'd like to start with some final thoughts, starting with Ted.
Final thoughts. I need to go to the bathroom. No. This is lovely. Always good to chat, and let's do this again.
All right. Victor, final thoughts?
I guess to echo Ted, I'm looking forward to doing this again, and also doing like maybe some deeper dives into the factions when we get a little closer to release, so we can to talk a bit more about that narrative, because we got so much of it. Like there was no chance to even scratch the surface really during this podcast, but There's more. There'll be more, and I can't wait to talk some more about it.
And Blake.
I'm going to go in a completely different route here. So I just want to say thank you to all of the fans and the community members that have followed us for this long. We wouldn't be here without anybody. We wouldn't be Ted. We wouldn't be here without any of them. Especially people that back the Kickstarter. It's a dream come true for each and every one of us that's working at the studio to be able to work on a game like this.
You're right. Look how professional you are.
Hey, it's got to be one of us, Ted. But yeah, it's incredibly humbling to know that our dream game is also a game that there are many thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of people out there that want to play it.
Zillions.
Yes. All of Mars, Ted.
Beautiful sentiment, Blake, and I appreciate that, and it does need to be said, because the community is foaming at the mouth for information, and of course they want to know that they're appreciated. So that's great to hear. You don't get that a lot, honestly, these days. A lot of people who produce things don't really put a lot of value on the different ideas, thoughts, and opinions that consumers have for their products. So it's good to hear that.
No, we definitely do. I mean, I'm mocking Blake because I always do, but he's right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we've reached the end of our adventure, and we want to thank you for listening and downloading. Please wishlist the Wayward Realms on Steam. It's a massive help. Hang out with us on Discord, found at waywardrealms.com. Follow us on all social at OnceLost Games. And don't forget to like, share, and smash that notification bell on YouTube at OnceLost. Smash it. We'll see you all in our travels, and until then, happy exploring.